My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 73, I thought I knew my family well. But sometimes the people closest to us can shock us in ways we never imagined. This is the story of how one sentence from my grandson changed everything and led to the most important decision of my life. It was a typical Saturday afternoon at Northgate Mall in Seattle. The holiday season was approaching, and the corridors buzzed with families shopping together. I had invited my grandson Tyler, now 22 and fresh out of college, for what I thought would be a pleasant afternoon of bonding. He had always been my pride and joy, the first in our family to graduate from university, thanks partly to the college fund I had secretly built for him over the years. We were walking past the food court when I noticed him. An elderly man, probably in his 80s, sat quietly on a bench near the fountain. His clothes were clean but worn, and beside him was a small cardboard sign that read, "Hungry Veteran, God Bless." What struck me wasn't just his appearance, but his dignity. He wasn't calling out or bothering anyone. He simply sat there with quiet hope in his weathered eyes. I stopped walking and reached into my purse. "Tyler, wait here for a moment," I said, pulling out a $20 bill. But before I could take a step, Tyler grabbed my arm with surprising force. "Grandma, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice filled with embarrassment and irritation. "I'm going to help that gentleman," I replied, confused by his reaction. That's when Tyler said the words that would haunt me for weeks. "Sorry, we don't help beggars. It's not our problem, and you're just enabling them. Come on, let's go buy something useful instead." The coldness in his voice hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't the compassionate boy I had raised during summers at my house, the child who used to cry when he saw hurt animals. This was someone I didn't recognize, someone who had learned to see fellow human beings as problems to be ignored. I stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Around us, the mall continued its cheerful chaos, but I felt as though time had stopped. "Tyler," I said slowly, "that man is somebody's father, somebody's grandfather. He served our country." "You don't know that," Tyler replied dismissively. "Half these people are just scammers anyway. Dad always says you're too soft, Grandma. You can't save everyone." The mention of my son, Tyler's father, stung even more. Had I failed so completely in raising my own child that he had passed these values on to the next generation? Without another word, I walked over to the veteran and gently placed the 20 in his hands. "Thank you for your service," I whispered. The gratitude in his eyes was overwhelming, but what affected me most was his quiet, "God bless you, ma'am." When I returned to Tyler, he was checking his phone impatiently. "Can we go now? This is embarrassing." We drove home in complete silence. But in my mind, I was already making plans. That evening, I called my lawyer. "Hey everyone, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you want to see how this story unfolds." The next morning brought one of those crisp Seattle days where the mountains seem close enough to touch. I sat in my kitchen, still processing what had happened at the mall, when my phone rang. It was my neighbor Janet calling with news that would add an unexpected layer to my already complex emotions. "Margaret, I hope I'm not calling too early." Janet's voice carried an unusual excitement. "You'll never believe what happened yesterday at the community center." "What's going on?" I asked, though my mind was still replaying Tyler's words from the previous day. "Remember that homeless veteran we've been trying to help through the winter program? James Morrison? Well, yesterday he came in with the most incredible story." Janet paused for effect. "Turns out he's not just any veteran, Margaret. He served in Vietnam, got the Bronze Star for saving 3 soldiers under enemy fire. But here's the amazing part. He's also a retired mathematics professor from University of Washington." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What happened? To him? "Medical bankruptcy," Janet continued. "His wife got cancer 5 years ago. He spent everything on her treatment, lost their house, and after she died, he just couldn't recover financially. He's been living in his car for 8 months, too proud to ask his adult children for help because he doesn't want to burden them. I felt my heart sink. This was exactly the kind of story Tyler would dismiss as manipulation or a sob story. But I knew better. I had lived long enough to understand that tragedy doesn't discriminate, and dignity often prevents people from asking for help until it's almost too late. Janet, what's his situation now? Well, that's why I'm calling. Someone gave him $20 yesterday at Northgate Mall, and he came to the center crying. He said it wasn't the money. It was the fact that someone saw him as a human being worth helping. It gave him hope to start trying again. The irony hit me like a lightning bolt. The man Tyler had dismissed as a beggar was more educated than anyone in our family, had served his country with distinction, and had sacrificed everything for love. Meanwhile, my grandson, who had benefited from every privilege I could provide, couldn't spare basic human decency for someone in need. That afternoon, I drove to the community center. I found James Morrison in the library corner, reading a worn, paperback novel. Up close, I could see the intelligence in his eyes, the careful way he had maintained his appearance despite his circumstances. When I introduced myself as the person who had helped him the day before, his reaction was immediate and heartfelt. "Ma'am, I can't tell you what your kindness meant to me," he said, standing up with the posture of someone who had never lost his military bearing. I was starting to feel invisible. We talked for over an hour. He told me about his late wife, Sarah, about their love story that had lasted 42 years, about his career teaching calculus to engineering students. He spoke about Vietnam, about coming home to protests and hatred, about building a life despite the challenges. His story was one of resilience, love, and the kind of quiet heroism that goes unrecognized every day. As I drove home, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. I called my lawyer again. "Robert, I need to make some changes to my will, and I need them done quickly." That evening, Tyler called to apologize for his attitude at the mall, but his words rang hollow. He was sorry for embarrassing me, not for his lack of compassion. The difference was everything. I didn't tell him about the call to my lawyer. Not yet. 2 weeks after the mall incident, I decided it was time for a family dinner. I invited Tyler, his parents, my son David and daughter-in-law Lisa, and his younger sister Emma, who was 19 and studying social work at the local community college. I had a purpose beyond just family bonding. I wanted to understand how deep these attitudes ran in my family. I prepared Tyler's favorite meal, pot roast with all the trimmings, and set the dining room table with my best china. The house felt warm and welcoming, filled with the aroma of home cooking and the gentle hum of family conversation. But underneath my grandmother's smile was a test that none of them saw coming. During dessert, I casually mentioned my volunteer work at the community center. "I've been spending time with some interesting people lately," I began, serving apple pie. "There's this gentleman, a Vietnam veteran and retired professor, who's been going through some hard times." Tyler barely looked up from his pie. "Oh, is this about that guy from the mall? Grandma, you're not still thinking about that, are you?" David, my son, shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, you know Tyler didn't mean anything by it. He's just practical. In this economy, we all have to look out for ourselves first." But Emma surprised me. "What happened at the mall?" she asked, setting down her fork and giving Tyler a sharp look. Before I could answer, Tyler launched into his version of events. Grandma wanted to give money to some homeless guy, and I told her it wasn't smart. These people just spend it on drugs or alcohol anyway. I was protecting her. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stared at her brother with disgust. "Tyler, that's horrible. How can you say that?" "It's realistic," he replied defensively. "Dad, back me up here." David cleared his throat. "Well, son, maybe you could have been more tactful, but the principle isn't wrong. We work hard for our money." Lisa nodded in agreement. "Margaret, you have such a good heart, but Tyler's right to worry about you being taken advantage of." I felt a chill settle over the warm dining room. 3 generations of my family, and only Emma seemed to have inherited the values I thought I had instilled in all of them. The disappointment was overwhelming, but it also crystallized something for me. "Let me tell you about James Morrison," I said quietly, and proceeded to share his full story. His military service, his teaching career, his sacrifice for his wife, his current struggle with homelessness despite his education and dignity. When I finished, the room was quiet again, but this time it was shame, not indifference. Emma was the first to speak. "Where is he staying now? Can we help him somehow?" Tyler, however, remained unmoved. "Grandma, that's a sad story, but it doesn't change the facts. There are programs for people like him. It's not our responsibility to fix everyone's problems." That's when I knew my decision was final. "You're absolutely right, Tyler," I said calmly. "We're not responsible for fixing everyone's problems, but we are responsible for our choices about what kind of people we want to be." After dinner, as everyone prepared to leave, I pulled Emma aside. "Would you like to volunteer with me at the community center next weekend?" Her eyes lit up. "Absolutely, Grandma." Tyler overheard and rolled his eyes. "Great, now you're recruiting Emma for your charity cases." As they all left that night, hugging me goodbye and thanking me for dinner, I felt a strange mixture of love and sadness. I loved my family, but I realized I didn't like who some of them had become. The next morning, I called Robert, my lawyer. Once more, "Robert, I'm ready to finalize those changes we discussed." Within a week, the new documents were signed and filed. Tyler's inheritance, which would have been substantial, was now redirected. Half would go to Emma, who shared my values, and half would go to the community center's Veteran Assistance Program in honor of James Morrison and others like him. I didn't plan to tell anyone about the change immediately. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. 3 months had passed since that fateful family dinner, and life had settled into a new routine. I was spending more time at the community center. Emma had become a regular volunteer, and I was building genuine friendships with people I might never have met otherwise. James Morrison had become a particular friend. We often discussed books and shared stories about our lives. What I didn't expect was the phone call that came on a rainy Tuesday morning in February. "Mrs. Thompson." The voice was young, nervous. "This is Marcus Chen from the Washington State Scholarship Foundation. I'm calling about Tyler Thompson. I believe he's your grandson?" My heart immediately jumped to the worst conclusions. "Is he all right? Has something happened?" "Oh, no, ma'am, he's fine. I'm calling about his application for our graduate scholarship program. He listed you as a character reference, and I wanted to verify some information." "Of course," I said, though I was puzzled. Tyler had never mentioned applying for graduate school. "He's applying for our full-ride scholarship to study business administration, and his essay is quite compelling. He writes about overcoming financial hardship and his commitment to social justice work, particularly with homeless veterans." I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Marcus continued enthusiastically. "His essay describes his volunteer work with homeless veterans and how his grandmother, that would be you, inspired him to dedicate his life to helping society's most vulnerable members. It's really quite moving. He mentions a specific veteran he helped, someone named James Morrison." The room seemed to spin around me. Tyler was using my volunteer work and James's story to fabricate a scholarship application about social justice and helping veterans. The very people he had dismissed as beggars were now his ticket to free graduate education. "Mr. Chen," I said carefully, "I think there might be some confusion. Could you email me Tyler's essay? I'd like to review it before providing my reference." "Absolutely. You must be so proud of him. Students like Tyler give us hope for the future." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my coffee growing cold. The betrayal felt even deeper than his callousness at the mall. Not only did Tyler lack compassion for people in need, but he was willing to exploit their stories for his own benefit. The email arrived an hour later. Reading Tyler's essay was like entering an alternate reality. He described himself as a social justice advocate who had dedicated countless hours to serving homeless veterans. He wrote eloquently about the dignity of service members who had fallen on hard times and his calling to make a difference in their lives. The most disturbing part was his description of James Morrison, not by name, but with enough detail that it was clearly him. Tyler wrote about life-changing conversations with a homeless professor who taught me that circumstances don't define character. He painted himself as the compassionate family member who had opened his grandmother's eyes to the needs of veterans. It was a complete fabrication, beautifully written and emotionally manipulative. That afternoon, I drove to Tyler's apartment near the university. He answered the door in pajama pants and a coffee-stained t-shirt, clearly surprised to see me. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk, Tyler, about your scholarship application." The color drained from his face. "How did you—" "They called me for a reference. Imagine my surprise when I learned about your extensive volunteer work with homeless veterans." He stepped aside to let me in, and I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out how to handle this situation. "Look, Grandma, I can explain." "Please do," I said, settling into his worn couch. "I'm particularly interested in how you came to dedicate your life to social justice when 3 months ago you couldn't spare basic human decency for a veteran in need." Tyler ran his hands through his hair. "Okay, look, maybe I exaggerated a little in the essay, but scholarship applications are competitive. Everyone embellishes their experiences." "Embellishes?" I kept my voice steady. "Tyler, you completely fabricated your character. You've never volunteered a single hour with veterans or anyone else." "But I could," he said desperately. "If I get this scholarship, I promise I'll start volunteering. I'll make it true retroactively." The audacity of his reasoning left me speechless for a moment. Here was my grandson, willing to lie his way into graduate school while promising to maybe develop a conscience later. "Tyler," I said finally, "do you understand what you've done? You've stolen James Morrison's story, a man you dismissed as a beggar, to advance your own career." For the first time, I saw something that might have been shame flicker across his face, but it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. "It's not stealing, it's inspiration. And besides, it's not like he's applying for scholarships. What's the harm?" That's when I realized that Tyler wasn't just callous or selfish. He was fundamentally lacking in moral understanding. The harm wasn't just to James or to the Scholarship Foundation. It was to Tyler himself, who was building his future on lies. I stood up to leave. "Tyler, I hope you get that scholarship, because you're going to need it." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You'll understand soon enough." If you're enjoying this story of family drama and moral reckonings, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. The next chapter brings shocking revelations that will change everything. 2 weeks after discovering Tyler's scholarship deception, I received an unexpected letter that would add another devastating layer to an already complex situation. It arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by registered mail, which immediately caught my attention. The return address showed it was from a law firm I didn't recognize, Brennan, Walsh & Associates. Inside was a letter that made my blood run cold. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," it began, "we represent Sarah Morrison, daughter of James Morrison. We understand that you have been in contact with our client's father, and we need to inform you of some concerning information that has come to our attention." Sarah Morrison? James had never mentioned having children. In all our conversations, he had spoken of his late wife with profound love, but never mentioned any surviving family members. He had specifically told me that he was alone in the world, which was part of what made his situation so heartbreaking. The letter continued, "Our client wishes to inform you that her father has a documented history of fraud and manipulation. While his military service and academic credentials are real, his current circumstances are largely fabricated. Mr. Morrison owns a substantial home in Bellevue, which he inherited from his late wife's estate. He has been using the community center and local charity organizations as a way to solicit sympathy and donations while maintaining a comfortable lifestyle. I had to read the paragraph twice. Bellevue was one of the wealthiest suburbs in the VI, Seattle area. If James owned property there, he was far from homeless. We have attempted to intervene multiple times, but our client's father has refused family assistance and continues to engage in what we can only describe as a performance of poverty. We are not seeking legal action at this time, but we wanted to ensure that kind-hearted individuals such as yourself are not being taken advantage of. The letter included copies of property records showing James Morrison as the owner of a $1.2 million home in Bellevue, along with a recent photograph of him entering what appeared to be an expensive car parked in the driveway. I sat in my kitchen, staring at these documents, feeling as though my entire understanding of the past few months was crumbling. James Morrison, the dignified veteran who had restored my faith in human resilience, was apparently running an elaborate con game. But something didn't feel right about the letter. Why would a daughter hire lawyers to expose her father's alleged fraud to his volunteer friends? Why not approach me directly? And why had James never mentioned having a daughter, especially one who was apparently concerned about his activities? That afternoon, I drove to the community center with the letter in my purse. I found James in his usual spot in the library corner, reading a worn copy of Steinbeck's East of Eden. When he looked up and smiled, I searched his face for any sign of deception, but all I saw was the same gentle intelligence that had drawn me to befriend him in the first place. "James," I said, sitting across from him, "I need to ask you about something, and I hope you'll be honest with me." His expression grew serious. "Of course, Margaret. What's troubling you?" I pulled out the letter. "I received this yesterday. It's about you." As he read, I watched his face transform. The color drained away and his hands began to shake slightly. But it wasn't the reaction of someone who had been caught in a lie. It was the reaction of someone experiencing profound pain. "Oh God," he whispered, "Sarah found you." "James, is what she's saying true? Do you own a house in Bellevue?" He was quiet for a long time, staring at the letter. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. "Margaret, the house is real, but I haven't lived there in over a year. I can't bear to be there." "Why?" "Because that's where my wife died. Every room holds memories that I can't face. Sarah, my daughter, she wants me to sell it and move into senior living, but I can't. It's all I have left of her mother. So instead, I've been living in my car, trying to find meaning in helping others, trying to feel useful again." "But the letter says you're defrauding people." "I've never asked anyone for money, Margaret, never. When people offer help, I accept it gratefully, but I've never solicited anything. I come to the community center because it's the only place I feel human anymore." As he spoke, pieces began falling into place. James's obvious education, his dignity, even in apparent poverty, the way he never seemed desperate or manipulative, it all made sense if he was someone dealing with profound grief rather than genuine destitution. "James, why didn't you tell me about the house?" "Because I was ashamed. How do you explain to someone that you're homeless by choice, that you have shelter but can't bear to use it? People understand economic hardship, but they don't understand emotional paralysis." I reached across the table and took his weathered hand. "James, grief isn't a character flaw, and having resources doesn't mean you don't deserve compassion." That evening, I called the law firm listed in the letter. After being transferred several times, I finally reached someone who could answer my questions. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but we have no client named Sarah Morrison, And we've never sent any correspondence regarding a James Morrison. It sounds like someone may have used our letterhead fraudulently. The implications hit me immediately. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to create fake legal documents to discredit James. But who would do such a thing? Then I remembered Tyler's scholarship essay and his willingness to fabricate entire experiences for personal gain. I remembered his dismissive attitude toward James and his embarrassment about my helping beggars. Was my own grandson capable of creating fake legal documents to sabotage a friendship that threatened his narrative about undeserving poor people? The answer, I was beginning to realize, was probably yes. The truth about the forged letter came out in the most unexpected way. 3 days after my conversation with the law firm, I received a panicked phone call from Tyler. "Grandma, we need to talk. It's urgent. Can I come over?" When he arrived at my house that evening, he looked terrible, pale, exhausted, and nervous. He kept checking his phone and looking over his shoulder as if he expected someone to follow him. "Tyler, what's wrong?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "I messed up, Grandma. Really badly." He collapsed into my living room chair, his head in his hands. "The Scholarship Foundation called today. They're investigating my application for fraud." "Oh?" I kept my voice neutral. "Someone reported that I fabricated my volunteer work. They want documentation of every hour I claim to have worked with veterans. They want to interview the people I supposedly helped." He looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Grandma, I need you to back me up. Just this once. Tell them you've seen me volunteering." The audacity was breathtaking. Even facing the consequences of his lies, Tyler was asking me to lie for him. "Tyler, I can't do that because it's not true." "But you could make it true. You know that homeless guy, James, whatever. You could introduce us. I could volunteer for a few weeks, and then technically I wouldn't be lying about helping him." This was exactly the moment I had been waiting for. Not because I wanted to see Tyler suffer, but because I needed to see if he was capable of learning from his mistakes. "Tyler," I said carefully, "did you send me a fake legal letter about James Morrison?" His face went white. "What? Why would you think that?" "Because someone created fraudulent legal documents trying to make me believe James was a con artist. Someone who wanted to discredit him and make me stop volunteering at the community center." Tyler's silence was answer enough. "Tyler, forgery is a felony. Creating fake legal documents is a serious crime." "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," the words burst out of him. I was embarrassed about your homeless friends, okay?" "Emma keeps talking about how inspiring you are, and Dad keeps saying how proud he is of your charity work, and everyone's acting like helping these people makes you some kind of saint." Finally, the truth. Tyler wasn't just callous or selfish. He was jealous of the attention and respect my volunteer work was earning. "So you decided to sabotage it?" "I thought if you realized that veteran guy was fake, you'd stop the whole charity thing and go back to being a normal grandma who just spoiled me." The depth of his selfishness and manipulation was staggering, but it also clarified everything for me. "Tyler, I need to tell you something. 3 months ago, after that day at the mall, I changed my will." He looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Your inheritance, the money I had saved for you, the stocks, the bonds, even this house, none of it is going to you anymore." The blood drained from his face. "Grandma, no. You can't be serious. Half of your inheritance is now going to Emma, who shares the values I tried to teach you. The other half is going to the community center's veteran assistance program." Tyler shot to his feet. "You can't do this. That money was supposed to be mine. I'm your first grandchild. And you're also the grandchild who called human beings in need beggars, who forged legal documents, who lied on scholarship applications, and who just asked me to commit fraud to save your reputation. But I'm family. Yes, you are. And because you're family, I'm giving you something more valuable than money. Consequences that might teach you to become a better person." Tyler stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, weighing his options, considering what manipulation might work on me. But perhaps he finally recognized that this wasn't a negotiation. What if I change? What if I really start volunteering? Really become the person I pretended to be in that essay? Then you'll have the satisfaction of becoming someone you can be proud of. But the will isn't changing back, Tyler. Actions have consequences. He left that night angry and bitter, and I didn't hear from him for weeks. But Emma came to visit the next day, having heard about the confrontation from Tyler himself. "Grandma, I think you did the right thing," she said as we prepared lunch together. "Tyler needed to face consequences." "I hope so, sweetheart. I hope he learns that character isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you choose to do with your opportunities." 6 months later, I got an update on Tyler. He had indeed lost the scholarship due to his fraudulent application, but he had enrolled in community college and started taking courses in social work. Emma told me he had even volunteered a few times at a different community center, not the one where James and I worked, but a start nonetheless. As for James Morrison, we had long conversations about grief, loss, and the different ways people cope with trauma. With some gentle encouragement, he began seeing a grief counselor and eventually started spending one night a week back in his Bellevue home. It was progress. The real lesson in all of this wasn't about money or wills or even family dynamics. It was about the simple truth that how we treat people in vulnerable moments reveals who we really are, and that it's never too late to choose to become better. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is to refuse to enable their worst impulses. Sometimes justice looks like an old woman with a purse full of courage, making hard choices about what kind of legacy she wants to leave behind. And sometimes, if we're very fortunate, the people we love most learn to deserve that love. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Stories like these remind us that every choice we make shapes not just our own character, but the world around us.